Hey, I wanted to share this recent coaching session I did with Marai. It was a session we did in conjunction with the Becoming a Boundary Architect course. And this was a course where we were really exploring and developing our capacity to create the kind of boundaries we need in our relationships and in our life to really become more sovereign and empowered and actually connected to a deeper sense of unity with life or flow with life. And Marai came to the coaching, just really wanting to refine. She's taken her practice pretty deep and been practicing transformational connection for a few years, and just noticed that there was some tricky dynamics she would end up in. And I imagine a lot of you could relate to that, where even though you're learning to go deeper and be more present in your relationships and wanting a clearer communication, there still can be like almost inexplicable dynamics or tensions or conflicts that are happening in relationships. And also like just tricky boundary negotiations, or sometimes they're not obviously boundary negotiations, but they're just challenges maybe with certain people or with people close to you. So Marai just really wanted to go deeper and look at the subtleties of how she was creating boundaries, and you're going to see during the coaching that it was a very subtle navigation and really looking at the details. And what I find with this kind of coaching and exploration is we do really get into the fine details, but once the boundaries are made clear and the way forward is kind of opened up, it actually becomes more simple. And I see boundaries a bit like, once you've built a good kind of fence with a gate in it, that can then stay there then for years. It might need a little maintenance, but so it pays for us to build very good, clear, connected boundaries. And then once they're in place and we've done that kind of exploration, that work to really get to the truth, then we can really create the relationships we really want. So in this session, we're going to start with, and this bit wasn't captured in the recording actually, but Marai will explain that there was a relationship with someone that she has deep connection with, and they can go really deep with each other and explore. But then there's sometimes these conflicts that come up and then they get quite entangled. So we're going to pick it up in the session. You're going to come in and we're just going to explore the impact of this kind of recent challenge, and what basically the whole session is about, as you'll see as we come to the end of the video, is actually what Marai needs is quite simple. So what she needs is, like, if someone's going to approach her, is some kind of invitation, a sense of safety and curiosity about her inner experience and how it's being explored. And this is what I see with a lot of people, especially when they're practicing and they've done deep therapy, and there can be sometimes this self-pressure that we always have to be available, or we need to be vulnerable on demand almost. But what I've seen is that really doesn't work. And when we can really be clear about how we want to be approached, and then deeper transformation is possible. So you're going to see, like, especially in the beginning of this session, that there's a lot of presence in the beginning, just trying to feel out the territory and to sense what it's really like for Marai. And this is really important to allow like her inner experience to come forward slowly. And what I start to notice in the session is there's this way she's able to see her experience in very subtle ways, and she can see like trauma patterns, attachment patterns, dynamics. She can see them in herself and in the other person, and it's at this refined, skillful capacity that's developed. And actually, the more what I've seen and like what emerges throughout this session is how that can also limit or can actually cross boundaries subtly when we use this capacity to see into ourselves and look for patterns in ourselves, and then look for patterns in the other. But at first it was just seeing this like subtle way she was sensing her, sense and relating to her experience. And you'll see how she sees almost two parts, where it's like the one is the witness and one is the more personal experience. And when we get to the end of this kind of first part of this coaching, what ends up happening when we start to try to see like the subtle, deeper patterns, we look for trauma, we look for attachment dynamics, is we can actually miss the simple boundary, the simple moment where the kind of conflict emerged. And then we're spending a lot of time exploring and delving into something that actually might not be necessary to even look at once we see the subtle boundary. So I'm gonna play the video, the first part of this session, and then we're going to stop and just again in part two look at some of the subtle ways we're exploring this topic. What I heard, just to see if we're on the same page, is that there's been a difficult boundary negotiation or the conflict, but you've been noticing a pattern that when you share what you need, something doesn't seem to go well, and then you're also noticing what feels like a past trauma.
I think you can go first.
I was just saying, was there more detail or refinement you would put in?
I think it feels like two parallel stories. Like my childhood trauma is something around it's not okay what I'm feeling and that I need something else. And then I think I have a part in myself internally that is like that's not okay to be needing something. And then I have a different part that comes out quite strongly that's like, oh, I'm allowed to have a need. And then when I bring my need, like in my imagination, I'm even like imagining that, oh, okay, so I'm actually feeling my need, which is new for me. This is really nice that I'm actually feeling it and I'm not ignoring it. I imagine when I bring it into connection now, the other person is going to be happy that I'm bringing my need. Right. And then it really hits me by surprise when the other person, and in this case it's a person where like, okay, they seem to feel like I'm making them wrong. And somehow then my system feels like, oh, but now it seems like it's not okay that I have this need. Yeah.
What do you notice now sharing this?
I noticed the story coming up again of, oh, this is just confusing and it just seems to become more and more difficult. With some kind of experience of confusion and like energy leaving my body, and like I feel depleted somehow. And it makes me want to give up on the boundary. It's like, yeah, I don't, maybe it's better if I don't have a boundary.
There were a lot of dense sensations starting to become present. Stomach, to my lower belly.
Yeah, and with a sense, and that also seems familiar, I want help. Like, why? I don't understand, why does it become so entangled? I wish there was someone who could just help me see a bit more clearly.
What's it like to realize that?
It feels, there's a hint of frustration because I've been here again and again the last 2 or 3 months, doing doing this course. This seems to where I end up quite often.
It seems like the boundary doesn't. There's a bit of an echo. Have you turned up the volume a little? Or something?
Yeah. Is it better now?
See. Yeah, so it sounds like when it doesn't seem to land well and the other person feels wronged, it seems like that already has quite an impact. It sounded like some kind of like collapse, or like, oh, I shouldn't, I'm not allowed to need what I need or have what I want. And then what also comes up is this sense of wishing you had the support you needed to navigate this.
Yeah.
But it also seemed like when you see that, there's also like a more of kind of witnessing, like part of you that's like, not this again. Why am I like, I seem to be stuck in this.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a contrast to sometimes when I bring my boundaries and everything feels like it's just giving me more and more clarity and more energy, and things click into place. And then it's this strong contrast to other situations like this where, okay, from there on, everything just seems more and more confusing. And I think I'm also still, like in those situations when I'm bringing my needs or my boundary, I think I'm still looking for the other person to almost like appreciate that I'm bringing it. And then when that doesn't come, it's difficult. Imagine I'm not fully believing that it's good or that I'm allowed to have needs.
The one thing I notice exploring this now with you is that it seems like the way you relate to your experience is you're both like trying to be in your truth, and at the same time, I don't know if analyzing is the right frame, or assessing whether there's some kind of activation or hidden pattern in the way you're showing up.
I notice when you speak, I feel relaxed when I hear speaking my truth and then somehow the second part
Yeah, well,
didn't
maybe,
fully land.
yeah, well, maybe an example. So, because it's quite subtle, so it sounds like that you'll say, what's the last thing? That in some situations you can set boundary, and it's clarifying and kind of realigns you,
Yeah.
and then in these other situations it seems to get entangled, and then so that's like the kind of you observing what's happening, and then there'll be a hypothesis or something, or an assessment of like, I think it might be because I'm needing them to like affirm my boundary, or be pleased that I'm showing my boundary. So it's like there's a part of you looking for the deeper pattern.
Yeah, and I think it like when you say it now, I'm like, yeah, but I'm doing that all the time.
Right. That seems yeah, true at this call. Like that every time we've explored a new layer, that there has been both what you're seeing, and then some kind of hypothesis, or like revealing what you think might be happening underneath.
Yeah, like when I feel touched by getting in touch with it, I get in touch with some exhaustion, and also I get in touch with, oh, but that's the part that gets me through like conflicts, or it's almost like I can't fully see if it's there all the time, but at least I'm seeing it be an overwork when I'm in like attachment or entanglement, or to like be able to see clearly what's happening and ideally step out of it.
Yeah. So it sounds like a capacity you've developed, and maybe also a way you've learned to kind of navigate connection by having a part of you that's looking for maybe what's hidden, or in you, and probably the other as well.
Yeah, and when I hear it now, I get in touch with both the clarity of that's the part that makes it able for me to see when I'm triggered or when the other person is triggered, or like to know when I'm in codependency. And then I also now get in touch with, oh, but there's this really big part that just doesn't understand what's actually happening and why it's almost like this movie being played. It's like, why, what's happening? Why did I end up here?
Imagine there's a connection between this capacity to look at what's underneath, or what might be the subtle pattern, and then this sense of kind of what's actually happening here. There's almost like there's some subtle sense of unreality.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the strong feeling that I have been with all day today. It's like spending time with the same person with whom I was in this interaction yesterday. Every time we try to speak about it, everything just seems so unreal. It's almost like I don't understand this reality or why it's here. And I think there's also like a slight sense of, and I find this very familiar from my trauma. It's like a part of me is anxious, I think, and wants to speak about it and is collapsed. And the other part is witnessing it and kind of wants to shake it off, just leave it and step out of it, so that I can regulate myself and be in a normal reality that's not so like triggered. And then I seem to go back and forth between those two because I don't know how to address the boundary if I'm in the regulated state. And as soon as I address the boundary, I get into this other reality and everything just gets stuck, and then I try to leave again.
And I wonder, like, even as you share this now, like, seem like you're acknowledging this sense of unreality. That's the thing that was happening. And you started the sentence with, and I think what's happening. And then you see this even more subtle kind of pattern.
Yeah.
And I wonder, what that's like. That, like, so you see something's happening, and then there's this really refined way of like trying to discover what that's really about.
It feels confusing, disorienting. And then there are moments of clarity. But it also means that I'm like really trying to see what is happening. And I think with that I'm actually confusing my own experience because I'm not staying in my own subjective experience, but I'm actually taking the other person's word and like the other person telling me that I'm making them wrong. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm not, but because you keep telling me that you think I am, I'm like letting it a little bit in or testing it with this witnessing or this part that wants to like really know what's happening. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that I'm not intending to make you wrong. But I get a bit confused and then I feel mostly like I'm trying to speak. Yeah, and this is very familiar. So when the other person is then asking, what is actually a boundary or your need? It feels like I'm trying things out, but I could be saying a lot of different things. And I think it's the witnessing speaking, and I'm just trying when I say them just to check whether they land in my subjective experience as, oh, this seems to be true.
Right.
But it also means that I'm changing my need all the time a little bit because I'm like, maybe it's this that I need, or maybe it's this, or like it could be something like this.
And it seems like this capacity that you're like even using right now, it's really refined, or it's really able to kind of look at a lot of complexity, and then see this subtlety of like, oh yeah, I'm not just like knowing what my need is. There is a part of it where I'm also testing it out because I don't know for sure, and then I keep refining it, and maybe that seems inconsistent. So it's a real kind of close self-observation, nuance, self-observation.
Yeah, and this seems to be at the core of like all the different angles or themes I wanted to bring into this container with you. It's almost like it's both about myself, but it's also about the other person. Like I get a bit lost in how to, it's almost like I don't know how to do basic connection right now because I'm so much in deep interpretations of the complexity of what is happening right now. Like I'm seeing pretty exactly that the other person's also kind of triggered and that their trauma is turned on. And then I'm seeing that I'm somewhere in trauma. It's almost like I'm seeing so much that I'm not seeing anything clearly.
Yeah, well, so this one thing we can explore here is in terms of the line that you could say the guardian lives in or on is guarding, like I've shared before, is between our inner experience and outer experience. But what's there's a subtlety to that. Another way to say it is like between our personal experience and then our unconscious experience. So what you could say in this capacity you've developed, which isn't an uncommon capacity if you've grown up in an environment that's been unsafe, that you start to develop a very advanced capacity to try to understand the patterns to keep yourself safe because nothing's made clear and the boundaries are very blurred. So it can be both a deep survival adaptation, but it also can be something enhanced with practice and therapy and circling. And so it can be it's an important capacity to explore. But just to try and simplify, you could say that each time you look at whether someone else is triggered and what might be going on inside of you, you're actually bypassing the guardian.
Mm.
Or at least you're playing on that line. And yeah, that line is really essential to our sense of sanity.
A part feels like relaxed as soon as we like differentiate the two parts that like one feels highly subjective and the other one feels like I don't know, witnessing or something. Something relaxes in me. And I also notice I'm shaking quite a lot. Like this really seems to go have quite an impact at least. And then it's almost like a childlike voice in my head. Then it's like, but how would I otherwise do it or something? It's like almost like, are you insane? Would I just kind of stay with my subjective experience, or
Right.
what is it that you're trying to tell me? Or like, but with a sense of the world is intense.
So it seems like this trembling, some like deep impact or embodied impact that seems, to become at least more conscious as this boundary is named more clearly.
Yeah.
And I get a real sense of enjoying being here with you as you get in touch with that. share it. And it's like then what reveals itself is like, but what you're sharing, it seems to give me a sense of like, but what am I going to do? Like the world's pretty intense, and it's almost like this suggests that maybe I shouldn't be using these advanced swords I've developed
Yeah.
and needed.
I noticed the gap between, I'm not even sure that's what you're saying, and it seems like that's what I'm hearing. And then I think what comes out is a part that's like, oh, yeah, this seems to be like attachment thing. Like it seems like an innocence comes out that's like, oh, maybe I'm allowed to just be with my feeling. I would like to just be allowed to feel. And then there's a clear experience of, but I'm trying that at the moment, and it seems to just lead to entanglement and collapse and things being difficult somehow. And I do have the clear experience of this witnessing. That's what I'm relying on all day or something.
Yeah, and I notice it in our exploration, because so there's on the one side there's this like thing that we've been kind of defining of, as you share your experience, you're also kind of hypothesizing about what is happening unconsciously in how you're showing up as you share it.
Yeah.
And that was like part of this, what you're sharing now as well, like that sensing maybe there's an attachment kind of influence that has this be really difficult for you. And then the other thing that stands out to me is the actual boundary where this has all occurred from. We actually haven't talked about that. So actually, there's all this nuance, and it gets more. I wouldn't say more and more. That sounds like, because I think it like this capacity doesn't need to be stopped in my world, or like its intelligence is going to be powerful for you.
Yeah.
But I don't know what is possible in exploring this. But yeah, it becomes like exploring the hypotheses of the hypotheses. And there is stuff to discover there because it feels real. I can feel the impact, but it gets very complex. Does that sound? You hear that?
It's impact on several levels. I imagine it's, again, I'm impacted in the witnessing, and I'm also impacted in my subjective experience, and they both have two different experiences. It's like what keeps coming to my mind even before you spoke is like, it feels a bit like I'm doing something a bit violent towards myself. And I think I often do that when I start regulating my nervous system. And then there's like quite high meta level reflection about, this is really useful because this is what I also wanted to speak about. Like how I believe my witnessing perspective, I think, is both transgressing my own boundary as well as the others. But like I start to make all kinds of very complex hypotheses that are probably quite often very accurate, or at least accurate, but it's almost like I can't bring them because then I'm just too deep in either in my own world or the others.
How is it to see that?
I want, like, the sentence comes up, it's like, I want help.
Is that similar to that earlier sense of wanting help? Or
Yeah. Like, it's a sense of something on a very basic level is missing.
This is the end of part 1 of this coaching session with Mireille. Join us in part 2, where we'll be continuing this journey, where we'll get even more granular on what it means to set clear boundaries that also maintain a sense of transformational tension or potential